Hello, it's Brad Laurie or BlockchainBrad, and today I'm speaking on behalf of BlockVera, all about truth, trust, and transparency. And today we have a very special interview, and I say special because this kind of collaboration is quite rare. We have Ian Balina in the hot seat right now to speak about all things on his mind on the blockchain.
Hey, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it. And let's get into it.
You're very welcome. And obviously you're very well known in the space, Ian, a controversial figure in some respects, but also someone who's respected in other camps as well. So just to be clear to all those wondering as well, the idea of this and the premise is to be as objective as possible and really allow Ian also to have his rightful place, allow him to have his own opinions, to have his own position in this space. It's as important as anyone's, including my own. So Ian, once again, this is objective and I appreciate your time. Now let's start, as you said, let's start with transparency. Now, if we have a look on your website, you are certainly that. You itemize exactly the kinds of things that you do. You explain all the different services that you've historically done. So do you want to talk to us a bit about those points, Ian, so we understand what your agenda is, what your motivation is, and what you do?
Yeah, so in terms of my agenda has always been to, one, be an investor in crypto, right? So I've never really tried to hide that, right? I'm an investor in the space trying to make money, as any other investor is, right? Trying to have life-changing money, crypto retirement. But the other aspect or the other agenda I have is also to educate people and teach them about how life-changing investing can be, right? Through cryptocurrencies, right? That's why since the beginning, I've always been documenting the process, right? That's where my entire platform comes from. The Diary of a Made Man began as a diary, right? A diary of my journey as an entrepreneur, then as an investor. And I was posting Blockfolio screenshots every single day, even back when I had no money. Back when my portfolio in crypto was under 20,000, I was posting every single day consistently for over 1 year, right? Until all the way to $5 million. Right. So to me, it was more about showing people the process, right? Because crypto, what really gave me that inspiration to persevere through any trials and tribulations was always falling in love with the process. And by creating a diary, it makes you really fall in love with the process, that daily grind.
I see. So you had the diary. It was a real legitimate daily grind and a daily routine that you disclosed. Now, in part of transparency, one of the things that, and you and I in pre-interview periods, we've discussed this point, is that it potentially could be one of the downfalls, of your fall from grace, arguably, in your transition to where you're at now, because you literally laid everything out. You told everyone exactly what you were investing in. You told them it was your investment agenda. And if we hark back to some of those things, let's talk about things like strategic partnerships, token metric, support, which you have done, exchange listing support, connecting with other influencers, marketing, branding, the list goes on. But you've certainly done all those things and you've worked with specific projects, but you've also been that one step further and you've been really transparent that you have really taken on the investment philosophy and ideology. So looking back, do you have any comment on the fact that you were so transparent about your investment approach?
Yes, right. So when I joined the space, it wasn't really transparent, right? And where I came from, working at IBM, working at Deloitte, my notion of crypto was the dark web, was Silk Road, right? People who weren't really the most stand-up characters. So when my friend kind of dispelled that myth that, hey, the real people in this space working on blockchain, on Bitcoin, whether at IBM, JP Morgan, real companies, real intellectuals really backing this space, I told myself, hey, you know what? I have to be in that same camp. So when I joined the space, I wanted to be fully transparent. I told everybody my full name, where I worked, everything about me, so that they could make the choice based on who I am as a person and where I'm going, whether they choose to follow me.
Right. Okay. So you're Ian Balina. I'm Brad Laurie. Everyone knows our names. Why aren't more people disclosing who they are in this space, Ian?
Well, there's several factors, right? Obviously privacy, but I think also some people just don't really have the qualifications to be even talking about anything. Right? For example, I met a crypto OG, and he was joking that most people in crypto that he knows talk about how they discovered Bitcoin in 2013. but he says they really discovered it from their drug dealer.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Right.
so there's some people who may be early in crypto who don't really, for example, if you got into crypto because you were on Silk Road, how do you then pivot and start showing people how to invest?
Mm.
Right? Because in a way, you're kind of pretty much lucky, right? Because of somebody you met who was doing something not so stand up at the time. But not to go down that road though. In terms of why I think people are private, I think is you have to really have an incentive to want to go public with things,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for me, going public with things was one. I've always been somebody who liked making content before crypto, right? I was making content before crypto, so I was already kind of trying to be a public figure, right?
Okay.
So everybody likes to poo-poo the term influencer, but I was already kind of an influencer before crypto, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just in other things, right? I had been featured in Wall Street Journal for my work with IBM and analytics, and I was blogging and creating content, and I had a vlog before crypto, right? So to me, it was just kind of natural where I began talking about crypto, and then I got an even bigger audience because people on crypto love crypto
Mm.
content. But it's not really for anybody out there, right? I think that people who choose to go public feel like they have a compelling reason to educate, right? So for me, I love educating people, right? That's where my 3 hour live streams came from, right?
Right.
Because I just love talking and getting down and dirty in the data,
Mm-hmm.
and to doing that via live streams was really a way for me to kind of practice my craft. Because the more I teach somebody, the more myself I truly understand something
Mm-hmm.
on a much deeper level.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you look at those who are more transparent about their identity, who are in that crypto content creation sphere, or even if we want to use the term influencer, because they do exist, we can't deny that there is an effect, a market effect, a network effect for some. Clearly, many of them have that premise to be educators in the space. I mean, on my background, I actually was a teacher before. I'm not a technologist or a techie, as they call them, but certainly was fascinated by just the blockchain and crypto itself. No doubt you came into this space with a similar agenda. But what I do want to find out, Ian, more about is what qualifies even us, what qualifies us or you to be in a position where we can educate when, you know, arguably the likes of Vitalik, for example, the likes of the architects of Bitcoin and those beyond them, they are in the real positions to really explicate the blockchain itself. So what gives us the right to be the conduit between those and, you know, the wider public?
Good question. So I would say the market is the market, right? This kind of is a business term, but you basically just put your content out there, and you let the community, the market, determine whether or not you're worthy of having an audience, right? For me, initially, I was just putting out content, but it wasn't really in a way of trying to teach people. It was more of documenting the process, which is something Gary Vee says. Gary, right? So he says, don't try to teach per se, just document how you are personally going through something, right? So for me, initially, I wasn't trying to teach people crypto, right,
Mm-hmm.
or investing. I was just documenting the craziness that was going on in my head in terms of creating token metrics, right? So I was just live streaming me researching projects live, me going through doing the due diligence, and people got value in that process,
Mm.
right? Then after a while, I built up a large following from that process. And then after the success I had from that process, then I think that kind of made me more qualified to then teach per se.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So over time, you know, the time you've been in the space, you feel like you've really educated yourself, even on some of those aspects. Now, given that you're involved more directly with projects, and you have certainly been in the past, do you feel that you have those qualifications to really work with teams? Given that, you know, you've seen
Yeah.
things play out the way they have.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Right. So I've been in this space now 3 years, and that was pretty much full time 3 years. Right. Working daily, 12 hours a day on crypto.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when you have these teams that come in, some of these founders have never even invested in an ICO or project, and they're trying to raise money or trying to communicate to a community of investors. They don't know how to do that, right? So for example, lots of communities, lots of projects like to work with me in terms of community building because they've seen how I've built a loyal following in the crypto space, right? And they themselves want to know how to do that, right? Some people call it me being a shill or whatever, but building that community from the ground up was not easy, right? I had to I had to really calculate my moves to build that and then execute on it. And that's
Right.
something any project out there that's trying to have the same thing can do.
Okay, well, let's talk about that sort of crypto chessboard analogy since you're talking about moves. Now, every move you've made hasn't been always, with the best outcome, let's say. And obviously there's been an agenda to make money in this space as well. And given that there's so many, let's use the term shitcoin or contentious coins, contentious projects, contentious startups, do you ever regret anything that you've invested in, for example, or that a move that you've made on this chessboard, given that the outcome hasn't always been productive for you, for your team, or even financially for others who've listened and purchased the same coin?
Absolutely. I would say there are lots of projects I regret investing, right? From Sparkster to EndaHash to Pixio Chain. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't really change a thing because as an investor, I know that most of my investments, right? The average investor, most of your investments will fail, right? You're just expecting maybe, because in the regular VC world, 1 out of 10 will become the next Uber or Facebook, right? You kind of go in there knowing most of the projects will fail, most investments will fail. But for me, I wouldn't really change a thing, right? Surprisingly, even with Sparkster, right? Because yes, I lost money in Sparkster, but even back then, I knew not to invest more than I was willing to lose, right? I personally put in 150 Ether, and some people may find it shocking that I'm willing to lose that at that time, right? But I didn't go all in, right? I know people, even my close friends, who got mortgages to go into Sparkster or some other projects, who were getting money from friends and family to subpool to go into projects and basically go all in.
Right.
And that was really scary, right? But for me, the reason why I wouldn't change anything with something like Sparkster is because messing up so badly, so publicly, or something like that, maybe over the last 1 year, improve my entire due diligence and research process, right? So for example, after Sparkster, we got 2 blockchain developers on our team, right? And then once Sparkster went public and began trading on exchanges and it opened down 90%, we got even more all-stars on our team, right? So I just hired a blockchain developer from JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. I just hired an analyst from Reliance Capital. Just hired a quant trader from a big Wall Street bank, right? These moves would not have happened if Sparkster didn't happen, right?
Right. So you're cleaning up your act because of some of the, the mistakes that you've made in the past. That's not to say that you won't make more in the future. We're going to, obviously, all of us, it behooves us all to be transparent as we move through. But let's move it back a bit again to that discussion of influencer in this context, specifically with Sparkster, since you brought it up. Now, in this situation, you have a public voice, Ian. Unlike the majority of people are listening to you, and indirectly, people did suffer. From those, yes, due diligence is our narrative. Yes, it's, their own responsibility to go and decide what they want to invest in. But fundamentally, this is where it gets cloudy because an influencer is also a content creator sometimes and vice versa. So do you ever take any responsibility for your position, your privileged position, to have the opportunity to really espouse certain projects? Obviously, you disclose you invest in them. So the network effect of that with your following would be that some of these people did invest in what turns out to be a very concerning and contentious project or startup and coin. So do you ever reach out and apologize, or do you ever reach out and respond to your audience?
Yeah, absolutely, right? I've definitely apologized several times regarding Sparkster, right? I definitely messed up, and our entire team messed up on that one. And we've been trying to fix things so that we can avoid problems like that arising again, right? But nobody's really perfect, right? I can't really say I'm never going to lose money on investment ever again, because as much as we try, still make mistakes. But I've definitely apologized for Sparkster, right? I've done that via YouTube, via Twitter, Telegram, email, right? Those who may have missed it, I'm apologizing again. I definitely messed up on Sparkster. That was a big L, but it's also been the biggest lesson learned, right? Because as you said, I knew I was influential, But sometimes, at least for me, I, I forgot how really influential I was, to a
Hmm.
point where even seasoned investors or traders came to me and told me they were blindly investing in projects just because I was investing.
Right.
And
And that in
because
that
pressure.
context, right. And in that context, Ian, let's talk about 2017, for example, because that was the year where luck predominated in many instances, not just for you, but for many people, because, you could throw a dart on a dartboard if we use that analogy, and really anything did well. So was it the fortune of the times that was, one of your key advantages, given that now we see a very different context?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think definitely the 2017 bull run, even part of 2018 where Sparkstar happened, there was a time where any project was doing well, right? But now we've left that time, right? ICOs have died,
Mm.
private sales have died. Now you have to really pick projects that are fundamentally good long term, right? Because with Sparkstar and some other projects, would I have invested in them if I knew that the lockup would have been 1 year? Hell no, right? But at that time, I was looking at this as 1 or 2 weeks and it's trading on exchanges, right? So in a way, it was kind of like investing in an IEO,
Right.
right? So, but once you take away that short trading window,
Mm.
and now you have 1 year vesting before the tokens are trading, that changes the entire perspective, right? So
Mm.
in a way, I sacrificed the long-term vision and thinking for the short term, thinking it was a short-term play.
Got
But now
it.
my entire mindset has shifted, where now everything I view it as a long-term play because anything can
That's
happen.
really interesting, Ian, because that's where we always differed. It's where we fought in many instances, because I was always a proponent of something of a true hodl, when it comes to authentic tech. And that is, or even today in crypto, still a conundrum, still a question whether or not that's even the right philosophy, because so much of the participants in crypto don't have that agenda. They have a speculative one, and they are here for trade. They are here for more BTC. So looking at this, and given that you've really transitioned your whole ethos, your whole metric analysis, do you think that we see a bit of a problem right now with the way IEOs are unfolding, with the way that the current crypto economy exists?
Yeah, I mean, IEOs are just pump and dumps, really, right? Every IEO goes down in price, right? Even the big ones, right? Whether Matic Network, all the Binance IEOs, they may open up 10x, 15x, they still go down to like 8x, right? Because all the funds being raised via the IEO are going towards market making, and the supply is being restricted to a point where nobody's really having access to the projects besides a few investors globally. So the exchanges can then pump the price. And I've spoken to the exchanges directly, and they've told me they don't want anybody to lose money on their IEOs,
Hmm.
right? That's why they force and basically, basically just kind of pressure these upcoming startups to change their terms on private investors because they want to make sure it just pumps 5x, 10x,
Okay.
15x.
So you're not a fan of IEOs, but let's explore this in the context of what they actually are. Because a lot of people misappropriate IEO as the actual startup, when really it's the methodology, it's the way in which they sort of enter the market, literally initial exchange offering. So at what point, though, do we talk about the veracity and the validity of the startup in terms of value? Because it may not be the case, Ian, that longitudinally or long term, we don't see some sort of increase in value over time, because some of these have real cred potentially.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of long term value, me personally, I've not invested in any IEOs because the allocations are too small. But if I were going to invest in a project I liked, for example, I liked Matic Network, I liked
Mm-hmm.
Harmony, projects like that, Elrond, I would wait until the initial dump from the IEO, right? Maybe 1 to a few months after it's done trading, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once that initial hype pump has played out, and then consider going in, right?
Right.
Because going in then I think is much more strategic as a long-term investor. Because buying, first of all, you can't really buy it much via the IEO in terms of because they restrict the supply. I mean, the allocation you have, right? So if you're a large investor trying to get a large allocation, you have to buy on the exchanges. But
Mm-hmm.
I would rather wait until that initial dump has happened before buying.
Right. It's a really interesting perspective as well, given that you also have an American, tie, like in terms of legalities and requirements. In my context, I often think about, that time before in pre-sale scenarios because I can, and that's a very different thing. That's the pre-IEO is something that is a privileged position to be in as well. But post-IEO, what you're clearly saying is that there are certain discussions that you're aware of with exchanges whereby they are trying to condition certain outcomes, and you're saying be aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, exchanges, man, they're so shady. That's one thing that I've learned from traveling the world, going into 36 countries last
Mm-hmm.
year. I mean, not just exchanges, people in crypto are so shady.
Let's
Even
talk
the
about that, Ian. Come on, let's explore this. This is a big statement. So exchanges, VCs, influencers,
yeah,
people in general, what does all that
everybody.
mean when you say shady?
Shady in the sense that they're operating behind closed doors and nobody really knows what's going on, right? Because people give me lots of flack publicly because I'm so transparent, right? As you mentioned, to a fault, right? Like, for example, I got hacked because I was so transparent, right? I basically made myself a target, right?
Mm.
I get made fun of publicly because I'm so transparent, right? For example, I'm an advisor to projects, right? And me, for the last few years, I've been transparent with how much I get compensated. It's up
Yes,
on
I've
my
actually written
website.
those down so we can talk about
Any-
that.
Anybody can go there and see that, right? For example, people say Ian's getting what, $1 million for advising this ICO. What the hell
Mm.
is he doing? But I'm not the only advisor in the industry. I mean, there are lots of people in the industry who are advisors. Some people who are totally unknown and are getting that same amount, right? But nobody even knows what they're getting. Nobody knows what their vesting schedule is.
Mm.
But
Ian,
me,
let's talk about this. This is a big deal. No one ever talks about this. I'm aware of it, and so are you. Now, we can call them whatever we want. I call them agents, or I call them consultants or networkers. You can have your own terms, but these are those in their shadows. These are those super networkers that don't have the front line. They don't cop any flack for anything, but they make an absolute fortune in this position you're saying, where they are advisors. Now, talk us through what an advisor actually truly does, because a lot of people don't even know what it means. Really, it's a super networker. So tell us from your experience, and we can talk about some of those payments you've received, because I've written them down, and I wanted to find out if there are any others that I've missed. But imagine if this is just a common thread that you're just sort of touching on, and that there's a lot more of,
yeah.
essentially advisors making a fortune behind the scenes.
So what an advisor does to me is help solve problems and get the project to where it's supposed to go, right? Now we're different from most advisors in that we always invest first before we even advise, right? We only advise projects we invest in. I
Okay.
know some advisors who don't even invest in projects; they just get free tokens, then they just dump on exchanges, right?
Yeah.
So for us, we always like to put our own skin in the game first before advising, right? Now, the way I view it is we're kind of like mentors. We'd help with any skill set. Me personally, right? When projects come to me, they want help with business development, with partnerships, and with community building,
Mm-hmm.
right? And those are things I'm able to help them with, right? So whether it's connecting them with other influencers I know around the world,
Mm.
right? But the way I view it is when I advise a project, they know that they have access to my network, right?
Right.
They talk to me, and I can pick up the phone and get them a meeting with anybody. For example, I was working with MetaHash and some other projects, right?
Mm-hmm.
They spent 6 months trying to get a hold of Hubi, could not get a hold of them.
Mm-hmm.
We told them to come with us to Hong Kong for token 2049. We got them a 1 hour meeting in person with the Hubi listing manager, just
Okay.
like that, right? And that's something that people I don't really share publicly,
But it
but
is really, I appreciate the transparency. I mean, you and I have never been friends, and we've always
yeah,
been, crypto colleagues, I suppose. But I have to say, as a colleague, I really do appreciate the kind of honesty you're bringing, because very few, Ian, will talk to me like this, knowing what we both know. Now, in this instance, what you're saying is that network has value. You've leveraged your network to really, be able to continue and monetize that. Do you ever regret doing that? Did you ever really need to monetize that aspect to be an advisor when you could have just invested and leveraged, your position and your fortune in terms of luck at the time and made money there and just continued to help these companies for free? Did you really need to monetize with them?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's something I've thought about as well. So I began advising after I quit IBM and went all in crypto,
Hmm.
right? So because I was getting over 100 projects a month wanting me to work with them, right? And
Especially in the
after,
bull run when there's a lot of
especially,
bullshit.
especially in the run, right? So after a while, I said, you know what? I mean, it makes sense to really use the skills I've learned from working with IBM and Deloitte and other companies, and also from investing,
Hmm.
to see if I can get in on the ground floor with the project and help them. Right. So it came out initially as me getting one or two projects out of 100 I was getting each month and working with them. Right. And
Right.
even back then, I noticed other influencers were getting paid to do videos, right?
Mm.
Whether it's 5 grand, well, a couple grand, 5 grand, 10 grand, 20 grand.
Yeah, some are
But
more even.
me as a sales guy, somebody who did sales in the corporate world, I knew I didn't want to be the guy who's getting paid to do one-off videos.
Hmm.
Because I mean, part of my friendship, you're basically just whoring yourself out,
Right.
right? Because you have so many different videos.
Mm.
And one thing I've learned from enterprise sales is if you're going to sell something, it makes more sense to sell the long-term package, right? So I didn't want to just do a video every week or every few weeks or a month. I said, let me just advise a project and work with it for 1 to 2 years long
Mm.
term, right?
That's
That's
a
kind of
really that's a really interesting point because you were averse to the short shill, which is fair to say. And having been someone who certainly has understood this space and really, I have really tried to resist that whole space as well. And you know that, and I've had to find my own way. As you're aware, I've done some ambassadorships. I've done whatever I can to again live with myself and be as moral as I possibly know how to be. But going back to you now, with the long-term play, the challenge though is the deduction of value, the deduction of quality. So let's go back to some of the things that you did start with, like Nucleus Vision, paid 500 ETH, Phantasma 1% of the tokens, MetaHash 2% of the tokens, Resistance 10K, Pareto 2.5 million. Ian, I'm not mentioning these to disparage you. You wrote them up and you're transparent about it, and you were paid a lot, for some of them. How do you deduce, or how did you deduce the quality of those when some of those were clearly crypto crap?
yeah. I mean, I would say hindsight is 2020, right? Because back then we were in a bull market, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nucleus Vision was December 2017,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
When it was at 20K,
Mm.
right? So I mean, so yeah, I mean, definitely the projects I've worked with, not all of them have done well, right? For example, Pareto, right? That was Eric, the CEO. He's the one who got me into Bitcoin and
Mm-hmm.
crypto. So he really changed my life. So I felt honored for me to kind of return the favor and see how I could help him with his project.
Dangerous when that subjective sort of position comes in.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Right? Definitely something, I mean, because
Hindsight's a bitch.
yeah, basically, right? Because there's so many things coming at you. And even if you ignore 99 out of 100, if you just get one and that one ends up being a flop, people don't see all the others you turn down. They just see
Mm.
that one flop, right? So it's definitely very, very tough, right? But I mean, I obviously made money investing and advising projects, so I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me, per
Mm-hmm.
se. But I mean, yeah, things definitely look different as you get older, as you get more mature, right? I mean,
Right.
I definitely have some regrets in terms of things I would have done differently, but I also realized that my mistakes is what has made me wiser now.
Mm. And speaking of wisdom, I mean, some of the wisest business people in the world, Ian, they say that they want to be the dumbest person at the boardroom, implying that they want to really invest in people, invest in, the intelligence of their board members. It seems like, without trying to FOMO you in any way, or in really to try and, espouse, I don't want to be someone who endorses anything you're doing, but it does seem from what you're saying that you are investing in people who are specifically good at what they do, skill sets in research, skill sets in business perhaps, so that it's not just, a small team, which is what you would have started with, trying to make those deductions back in 2017.
Yeah, I mean, so now our entire team is bigger, right? We have over 10 people working with us. So we have checks and balances. We have an investment committee. We have all these different smart people who are basically experts in their particular domain, whether
Mm.
it's trading, whether it's blockchain development, whether it's being a investment analyst. All those people working alongside me, I think we're definitely much smarter than and much more progressive than we were 1 year ago, 2 years ago.
Right. So are you transparent now about your current investments like you were, given that transparency was actually possibly something that opened you up to significant criticism and risk?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely try to still be transparent, but people who definitely have noticed I'm not really putting myself out there in the public spotlight as much, right?
Mm.
For example, I took down my spreadsheet January 2018 at the peak of the bull run, right? Now it's back up, but back then I took it down because so many people were blindly investing off that spreadsheet, and it was a free spreadsheet, but they were making requests like it was a paid product. And
Right.
that was something I couldn't really deal with because this was a free service I was offering people. I
Mm.
kind of take the free service. If you don't like it, you're free to go elsewhere, right? Nobody's forcing you to use this free service. But people were making like they would just curse me out if I had a bad project, or if I didn't add something or do something, or if I talked about a project and it got too much attention and they couldn't get an allocation, or if the allocation shrunk. There were
Mm.
so many different, it was basically a lose-lose, right? There wasn't really an incentive for me to keep it going, especially
Right.
as a product.
Sure, and it also reinforced the reality that we're talking about pre-utility. We're literally talking in an era where none of these were proven to have real use case or real adoption at that point. These were in those pre-utility investment scenarios, quite an oxymoron in itself, and a lot of pressure from all different parties toward you and from you, all kinds of things in terms of trying to make sure that the investments made by certain parties did well. Now, in this scenario, I wanted to ask you, we see a lot of ratings, we see a lot of entities. We even see media parties, really investing in projects and promoting them as media. A lot of, convolution happening. What are your thoughts on these kinds of investment-based media ratings?
What do you mean? I'm not sure I
So
understand.
I'll give you a bit of an example. So if we use parties like, let's say, the Block or Crypto Briefing or any of them, or CoinDesk, if you do enough research, you see that there's an investment agenda for many of these media parties. We also see influencers doing ratings. We see all kinds of entities doing it. Now, often underlying that agenda is an investment that they've made. So does it concern you about the chicken before the egg? That sometimes that they're feeding into their own narrative to try and fill their own bags.
Yeah, I mean, I know lots of other investors. I mean, even for example, right, the Block, right? They wrote some BS article about me, trying to FUD me, and then I had to basically get my legal team to go after them to kind of tell them, hey, like we're watching you guys. If you're trying to post anything that's factually incorrect, we're gonna sue you,
Okay.
right? But I know some other investors privately, right? Going back to the whole how people are kind of shady.
Right.
So he was telling my business partners that, hey, we should think of investing in the Block's equity round so that we have them in our corner and they don't write anything bad about us.
And that's how it goes,
Right?
you think? Do you think that's all about who you
Uh,
know?
I mean, I think that definitely does play a factor, right? But I mean, for us, obviously, we didn't do that because it's not anything we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the media is not always as transparent, especially in crypto. Crypto media is complete garbage, right? But
Okay.
it's basically fake news media. They'll publish anything, right? As we saw with Justin Sun, right? They published about him being locked up in China when he was in San Francisco, and this was Coindesk, which is supposed to have a higher editorial standard than most publications in crypto. Even
So
they
you're
publish.
saying that there's agendas we don't understand that motivate them to go and publish certain pieces.
Yeah, yeah, because they got caught last week, right? But how many times have they not been caught in a lie, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether, for example, people to this day online think that I faked my hack for tax reasons because publications would hear somebody on Twitter talk about it, and then mention it, then some other publication mentions that. Now that all these other publications begin talking about it like it's facts when it's not.
Yeah, it becomes Chinese whispers, and obviously none of us can really know, but there are certain reasons also, or there's certain rumors, as you say. There's a lot of distrust in you at the time or from certain parties. So there's lots of things that had sort of caused that effect. Certainly,
Yeah,
I'm not
actually
supporting
speaking
that.
of that, right? So I kind of want to delve deeper on that.
Okay.
Right? I know personally, I've had other VCs try to do smear campaigns on me, right?
Okay.
On Diary of a Made Man, 100x Advisors, trying to smear our brand, our image, right? So for example, going back to Chromia, right? Chromopolis, they were raising $15 million via a private sale. And they gave us 100x Advisors and our network $2.5 million allocation.
Which is a lot.
Right? Which is a lot, right? But to me, I mean, that's something projects have always been doing. They've just been doing it to the large VCs, right? To the Andreessen Horowitz.
So they treated you like a VC in this instance, and that's like important because I followed this on at the time as well. Yeah. Remember,
not just like a VC, but like the best VC out there, right? Because they believe that we would bring the most value to them out of any other VC there. And this is not just because I'm a shill or whatever, but just based on the value they knew we would bring to them.
Okay.
Right? All the other VCs, all the traditional VCs were pissed off, right? To a point, they began basically going in Telegram groups via other accounts or via their friends and basically spreading FUD, right? I noticed because we had people look into it and there was particular VCs, right? Actually, even one in Australia that was part of that FUD campaign.
Okay.
Right? And then the projects as well, right? They come to us and tell us, hey, these VCs are saying they want to invest, but they want us out of the project. Even though we're the ones who found the project 6 months before them and have been working with the project, they want to kick us out of the project so that they can invest.
So what happened, Ian? There was consistent FUD. There was consistent confusion as well with Chromia all the way through. You know that because none of us from the sort of the outside looking in really understood who were the advisors, who was actually part of the investor circle. It was very opaque.
Yeah, I mean, so initially, because here's a story with Chromia, right? So they've been around for a while. We met them on our Crypto World Tour in Tel Aviv, right? I met Or in Tel Aviv, Israel. This was actually, we had a chance to meet the team in Stockholm, Sweden in like around April, springtime 2018. But because of our schedule, we couldn't meet the CEO in Sweden. So we met Or in October in Tel Aviv. Then the private sale happened or whatever. So we had known the project for over 6 months, right? And we didn't even go public with it until other people went public with it, right? That this is a good project because I didn't want to be accused of trying to show this project. Right? I let other people, other influencers, or hey, Maddie.
I can understand also why, because sure, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can understand why also, Ian, because you were part of the of architecting or advising the metrics themselves. So it would have been very remiss of you to go and shill your own project if you were such a major stakeholder in this project.
So actually, we didn't really advise them at that point yet, right? Back then, we just came in as investors.
Okay.
And we were having conversations with them about possibly joining them as advisors.
I see.
Right? But because of the whole public FUD, we both mutually chose that it was not really something we should do at that point in time.
Okay.
Right? So basically, the public kind of made the voices heard. But to me, that really opened my eyes because people were mad at us for getting a large allocation. Yet I had known, because I've done so many private sales, I always know that there's basically a lead investor, right? Similar to equity fundraise. There's always a lead investor. And when it's other funds, right, like Polychain or whatever, Neo Global Capital, all these other funds get the same size allocations as lead investors, nobody complains about it. But because it was me and 100x and whoever we are.
Well, it's because we'd never seen that before as well, Ian, because you're a prominent influencer, you're a prominent crypto content creator. So once again, you had multiple hats, and we're seeing now other prominent speakers in crypto do that. Like for example, Popliano has his own fund. We see other new influencers build up their own funds. It's nothing new now, but back then it wasn't. So I think it was really a shock to the system. Doesn't mean it was okay for any party to perhaps vilify you for it, but it did happen. Now with Chromia, I want to ask you, can you clarify a few things a bit more on this? Because it was confusing to many who were the advisors essentially were in the end, because there were the likes of Ben Gadenzi, I think, I'm not sure, Andrew Lee, some other names came up like Manran. I tweeted all about this, as you know, to try and get understanding. So can you clarify to us what happened to Chromia, what played out?
So the only advisor at that time that I was aware of was Andrew Lee. Then, I mean, I knew Andrew Lee was working with Ben on lots of projects, right? Then Andrew Lee is also the one who basically kind of brought us in, right? This was 6-7 months back. But in terms of actual advisors, Andrew Lee, and a few others who were basically working with the company before that, right? Like Benny and others, right? And Charlie Lee, right?
To support the project. Okay.
Yeah, but in terms of other advisors, I don't really think there were any besides that, right? I know for us it was a discussion, but nothing had been signed yet at the time.
Got it. Okay, so what was the follow-up? You know, from your experience looking back now, seeing everything play out the way it did, how would you sort of color the experience subsequent to, you know, this point we're talking about now?
I mean, what it showed me was, I mean, I have to really be careful because I'm a public figure, right? Things that other VCs or investors are doing, right? I can't necessarily do them, right? If some VC has been getting 10% of the hard cap for the allocation, I can't do that because I'm public. Because I mean, people are going to look at that, and whether it's envy or whatever, they don't like seeing me be the person to do things like that, even though it may be the complete norm, right? For investing, right? The fact that it's Ian Balina and there's so many good and bad about him, right? Not everybody likes to see that, right? I mean, even to a point where I had some other influencer who I respect, who was in this space way before me. He said, Ian, make your money privately. Nobody wants to see you in a Lambo, right? Because that makes them question everything about their life. And don't do that. Like, don't show off. Don't do anything. Make your money behind the scenes. And
so don't be you, is what they're saying, because part of, you know, being forward and being in the public was just your nature.
Yeah, I mean, it was my nature because I've always wanted to help other people make money and take them along the journey, right? Like, because I've had lots of friends tell me, Ian, like, why are you so public with this? I mean, stop wasting time with retail investors. Just focus on your money. You stay behind the scenes. Don't blog post anything. I even almost lost one friend because I wouldn't stop posting my Blockfolio publicly.
That's really interesting. And Ian, you know, in that context, we know that you were transparent about your investments and you did the content, but you went one step further and you did crypto videos, crypto songs with the word moon in them. I mean, that was something that really did upset a lot of people. What are your thoughts on that? Did you take it too far in that instance?
I mean, sure, some could say that, but yep, I don't think I did. I mean, yes, I know not everybody liked it, right? Because I mean, but that's expected, right? Not everybody's gonna like Lamborghinis. Not everybody's gonna like rap music. But for me, I guess one of the natures of being an entrepreneur is you're very creative, right? You're willing to take risks in everything. So for me, I put out a song. The song on SoundCloud had 40,000 plays. This is a crypto song. I said, wow, this has been well received, right? Maybe I should make a music video, right? So to me, I mean, it was pretty strategic, right? If I put out the song and it had one play or one view, there would be no music video, right? But the song was well received. I still get people messaging me today saying 1 year later, 2 years later, or whatever. Yeah, 1.5 years later saying, Ian, my baby is singing the song as she's having breakfast because the song's on Spotify or whatever. Right? Or hey, Ian, I work out to this song.
But
right?
in that context, if I made a song, to sing about fiat, for example, and the benefits of something like that, something quite bizarre, do you think that you would espouse that kind of audience, for young people as well? Like, what was the real premise behind the video itself? Was it to bring awareness to crypto? Was it to try and bring awareness to
I mean,
you?
both, right? It was basically a commercial, right? Kind of like, because I know one of the biggest ways to spread ideas is through music and entertainment,
Hmm.
right? Anywhere you go in the world, one thing that's always consistent, no matter where you go, American music travels, right? I'll be on a beach in Thailand, they're playing American music, they're playing Drake, they're playing Rihanna, whatever.
That's
I'll go
true.
to a, a club or bar in Moscow, Russia, they're playing American music, right? I
Hmm.
bet if I go to Australia, they're playing American music,
Yeah.
right? So to me, music is something inherently natural to humans and a way to really spread ideas. So it was really an experiment saying, hey, let me see if I can spread the message and vision we have for crypto via music,
Okay.
right?
So it was a deliberate
So,
way of trying to spread more of the crypto
yeah,
word. Okay.
right. Plus, I had seen like Huddle Gang, right? That was a pretty popular song,
Hmm.
right? So I said, why can't I do that? I mean, yes, I'm an investor, but I
Hmm.
can make a music video and
Yeah, well, you've done a
help.
lot of different things, and we're going to talk about some of the other creative things you've done. But to hark back to the impact it had on you going through the Chromia experience. Now, VCs, you allege, targeted you. What was the aftermath of that in terms of subsequent investment opportunities? Did this hinder you from that point forth? Because I'd imagine that there's a bit of I've used the word cartel, so I don't know if you want to or not, but my analogy was that there's people in power that make serious decisions. Now, if VCs align and try to oust you, to push you away from potentially investing, that would be difficult for you in the future, especially if they align with exchanges and they align with other influencers. So did it get tough for you?
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily say tough, but I mean, definitely there were some projects I could tell VCs or the cartel or whatever you want to call it were
Mm.
colluding to not get me in, right? Projects I was talking to all of a sudden go silent. But most projects were nice enough to tell me, hey, these VCs are trying to push you out of the project and say they'll only invest if you invest,
Mm.
right? This happened with two projects actually, right?
Okay.
But because if I was just some random person who's trying to do stuff via videos, most projects would probably not deal with me. But the projects know the level of work we put in on this, right? So
Mm.
Chromia, for example, right? The reason why they fought to keep us in, they told us that we did the most due diligence on them out of any investor that invested.
That's
Right? Just think
interesting.
for a second.
Mm.
Right? The project told us out of all the investors that invested, our team did the most due diligence. Meaning, like all these VCs, they're just watching a video. They're really just armchair VCs. They're watching a video online, then they just chase the FOMO and invest, and then they have
Mm.
the nerve to try to push us out, not
Right.
knowing we're doing research on this project for 6 months.
Right. And Ian, we
Right?
need to talk about that in the context of today as well, because we're seeing the converse of this. We're not seeing a lot of frontline influencers who are potentially getting, token deals, certainly getting massive fiat deals. We're not seeing any evidence of due diligence teams from them, for the most part. Many of them are actually incentivized, or many of them are aligned with their interest of their populist agenda. They can have more reach. And so, particularly in a bear market, I would assume many different startups are looking for that kind of reach. So, do you see the interesting play now? It seems to have shifted more towards a populist agenda.
Yeah, I mean, people like to really just follow the trend and then ride the trend, and then other upcoming influencers, especially in the bear market, I noticed they like to build their names off of bashing other influencers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to them, as opposed to building this is something Garvey says, as opposed to building the tallest building in the city, right? By actually building it, they want to build the tallest building in the city by tearing down all the other buildings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that, right? Because in the bear market,
Well, Donald Trump is president. you
yeah,
know.
so I noticed so many other influencers, they would just copycat and just pile on whatever other things other influencers were doing to bash somebody, whether me or somebody else, they would just pile on without doing much research, just to follow the trend and get views, right? So I mean, for example, Chico Crypto, right? He kind of was born in the bear market, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was born in the same time, I guess you could say, if it was a birth. Yes, that's true.
Right. But he built his audience from bashing people, whether Binance, CZ, me. I mean, he tried bashing me, but I had my illegal team talk to him, and he basically stopped, right? But
well, I can't defend him because I'm not him, but I can tell you that I've known Chico, and I'll literally look down the camera and tell you that he certainly has bashed people for sure, but he also has done his part, I would argue, to try and also put forward his own positions, you know, his own viewpoints, his own research, he would argue as well. So yes, but I do agree with you that he is more forthright. He is much more vocal when it comes to naming and shaming than almost anyone. I've been in that line of fire, so I'm not going to deny it, but I do think that there's more than just, you know, that statement that he's the basher.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I mean, I do know his content has been getting better, or I should say maybe less bashful, right? He's now kind of doing the news, the interviews on the beach, whatever, right? About crypto. But I mean, early in the beginning, he was definitely coming for people, right? I mean, and this is a strategy I know too well, right?
Well, it definitely worked for him. I mean, he certainly got attention for it.
Yeah, because the best way to get attention, if you have no attention, is to start a debate with the people who have the attention. And once they recognize you, then you get some attention, right?
And so, do you think, let's talk about that though, Ian, because you know I do. Let's be honest, I do. I debate people, I'll challenge them. Do you think it's a bad thing if people try to raise the bar of transparency or raise the bar of credibility or truth? Do you think that we need to do more of that? Do you think sometimes Chico is actually raising really valid concerns? I'm not saying everything he said about you or even me is accurate, but he certainly does raise things sometimes that perhaps need to be. And maybe we need to encourage more of people having the audacity and the gumption to really step up, because so few do it. So few, most are just so silent.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of bring this to a much bigger level, not just Chico, but all influencers in general, right? I mean, it's definitely great to be transparent, to try to fight for a cause of something you believe in. But the issue I see is all these people are fighting for supposedly what they believe in, right? Yet they aren't really as transparent, right? Because I know lots of influencers, right? Who are getting paid from a couple of grand to $5,000 or 20 grand to make sponsored videos.
Yeah.
But they don't even tell the community, the audience, their sponsored videos. They'll just put like one line of text in the description of the video at the end.
Yes.
Right. Or sometimes they'll put it in the middle of the video, and they're getting paid. And so I know some influencers who will do a video on a ICO or token, right? Basically a shitcoin, right? And when they get paid, they ask for Bitcoin. Right?
I know. So I know the same. We really need to open this up a bit more, because I have considered even putting out a tweet asking a genuine question, saying, why is it that some influencers are openly discussing their support only for BTC? This literally is happening, but they're being paid to do sponsored content in altcoins that they would deem as sometimes shitcoins, even as you alluded to. But yet they're being paid in BTC, Ethereum, or fiat sometimes, and they're going for that maximalist agenda, or they're going for their own agenda. I'm not really sure what it is, but it's certainly not in the interest of a long-term support for that project. Is this a crypto cancer right now?
I mean, I believe so. I mean, because it's not really transparent or congruent, no matter how you slice it, right? Because the fact that they're asking for BTC as opposed to the token means that they don't believe in the token. They believe that Bitcoin is superior to the token, short term and long term, right? Or for example, right, when I advise projects, right, for the most part, I've been getting tokens. So I mean,
so you're taking the risk along with everybody else.
For example, MetaHash, Phantasma, Pareto, I mean, all these projects, I mean, they're basically dumped, right? So I took that L as well. I lost money as well, right? So I'm feeling that pain per se.
Yes, and it's the same for me with my ambassadorships. I mean, I don't have anywhere near the kind of financial success you've had, but when I have ever arranged something as an ambassador, it's always built in to have some of the tokens that I'll still hold, and I still hold to those to this day. That doesn't necessarily mean that I know that hodling is the strategy that's going to play out, because hodling is investing in the belief of utility. Really, that it will eventually become a viable mode of transfer. But in the context of today, because there's such a dearth of proof of utility, I mean, what the bloody hell are we doing if we are promoting something but don't believe in it on camera? Honestly, let's just be real about that. What does it actually mean for the people who are listening?
I mean, it means they got to do their own research, right? It's really hard to trust, right? Which is kind of ironic because that's why people trusted me, and right, because they knew lots of other people were doing that, and they knew if Ian was actually backing a project
Mm,
was because he believed in it. Now,
mm,
yes, I I could be wrong, right? But they knew that I had actual skin in the game,
right.
and that's why it gave more confidence to projects. I mean, and also to investors.
Mm.
And this is the issue that it kind of brought, though, is investors would then blindly invest. Right?
Makes a lot, yeah. I mean, it's good that we're talking so openly about this. And I wanted to ask you, Ian, now, if we fast forward the clock to present day, you disclose your portfolio even. Have you amended that? Because I wrote down some things that are in your portfolio, and you even put percentages, things like COTI, CHR, Phantasma, MHC, and the list goes on. But do you update that now to be current and disclose what you're doing in your portfolio with your 100x
Yeah, I mean, so
entity?
that page was updated within a month, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think about 30 days or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't really trade, right? So, and to be honest, right now, I've been selling because I'm full time in crypto. So
Mm.
I've been selling my crypto to live off of, and also to mainly to fund my business, right? Because I'm launching a brand new business called Tokenmetrics,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been funding that myself, right? And because the way I view it is, I've gotten so tired of projects messing up and really blowing things, right? And it's now come to a point where there is no incentive. The risk to reward is not there to invest in a private sale anymore when projects could change the vesting, right? Kind of like how we saw with Sparkster, Chromia, how projects could, like Chromia, right? They told us they're going to launch in a month or two. Took them 12 months. Then they launched in 12 months, then added extra 1 year vesting, and they changed the vesting to daily token release. Something like that
Okay.
just pissed me off, right? To a point I
Mm,
said, why am I even dealing with this BS,
mm,
right? Or even resistance, right? Now I'm working with projects as an advisor, trying to help them as much as I can. And after a while, you kind of notice that these projects, the founders are just trying to kind of make money for themselves, right?
right.
And to me, it came to a point I said, you know what? I've made enough money in crypto, right? Crypto has helped me go from making six figures to becoming a millionaire.
Hmm.
But if I really want to become a billionaire, which is something I've been saying publicly, even prior
So
to
you're
crypto.
motivated by money. You want to be, the real deal billionaire. Okay, so you're clear about that. But in this context, you talking about resistance and Sparkster, for example, it must be tough when you're leading this out, you're involved, and they go and change everything, and you're part of it. You really, I've never been a paid advisor, so I wouldn't know. But if you're expected to know and be supporting that company, and they don't tell you some of those changes, that must be frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like with resistance, right? We believe people. I've already kind of mentioned this publicly, but we believe that I mean, they told us that, hey, we'll launch this product in 1 to 2 months. And that's what made us invest. That's what made us also advise.
Hmm.
Then it takes 7 months and nothing has come out. So to us, that's frustrating because we've put our name, brand, everything behind us, and we're flying with them around the world to meetings,
Mm.
right? And we're like, what the hell is going on here, right? And then when they tell people in our network, hey, we're talking to Huobi, Binance, whatever. Like for example, people are giving me flack for the Binance post, but that wasn't my post. That was just me sharing a post the CEO was sharing with investors,
Hmm.
private investors, right? He was basically trying to show Binance or the likelihood of them going on Binance to investors to raise money. right? And I thought it was something that was pretty sure to happen, because I was like, okay, he's talking with the CZ. Asked him about it. He said, yeah, he was very optimistic, right? Blah blah blah. I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. So I shared this with my community. Then CZ says, I wasn't talking to that guy. I was just saying hello or whatever, right? So he
Right.
kind of misled me, but I got the public pushback on that
I
publicly.
see, and that's always going to happen if you're vocal and you're independent in that sense. But what about the short-term shill? Now, I did a bit of a Google search, looking through YouTube and that sort of thing, to look at who were the predominant sponsored ambassadors or speakers for resistance, for example. And it seems there's a bit of a pattern going on as well. Have you noticed that? I mean, there were people like Box Binding, Lark, Ivan on Tech, all sponsored, all speaking about resistance. This seems to be a common thread going on. I'm not suggesting any of them are doing anything untoward, but they are just because they are disclosing their sponsored pieces. That's important, I do acknowledge. But the patterns, the propensity for this continued scenario, what's going on there, Ian? I mean, do you know much more about why we see this play out?
I mean, I know with resistance, they were just trying to get attention, trying to get more investors in, right? So they felt if they paid other influencers like Ivan on Tech or Box Mining to do videos talking about their product, their decks, that they would get more attention, more awareness, more investors, right?
But what about the argument, going back to Sparksters and back to the others, what about the argument of quality? What about the integrity of the project? Where does that come into play? Because I've been very vocal about resistance, and I don't hold back. But at what point does tech come into the name of Ivan on Tech? I mean, when do we start to redress some of these situations where money is taking precedence over potential quality of projects?
Yeah, I mean, I know Ivan on Tech personally, right? From working with our resistance, I met him in Davos, right? I know. Well, actually, I don't really know in terms of the Sparkster video and other videos. All I can say is I think he's just doing this more as a sponsored video, right? So kind of like a commercial, right? Because with him, he's not really investing in the projects, right? So I know he's not doing them from a price or speculation perspective. He's
Because
doing them
the investors.
like that. Yes, so his videos are purely just focusing on the tech, right? So to him, right, to do an interview with somebody, right? For Sparkster, I believe the way he saw it is this project has lots of views and attention on social media via Telegram and Twitter, whatever, whether good or bad, right? I'm going to take advantage of these eyeballs.
But Ian, I really appreciate honesty, but let's talk about that, because in June this happened, where he talked about Sparkster when there was already a huge amount of concerns about that project, and yet he went ahead and did that. The thing is that he has such an immense following. The impact of that would be, or the art and the network effects of that would be, some people would translate that as something that maybe they would invest in. It's a really tough call to say even and discuss this, but that's the truth. So my question is, where is this technological assessment coming? Shouldn't it be our responsibility to make sure that we not only take money, if that's our agenda for talking to a project, but also look at the value of it from a technological perspective? Because if you do enough research in some of these projects, like the ones we're talking about, I think that very quickly people would find some serious technological concerns.
Yeah, I mean, like with Sparkster, right? I think everybody can now see that was a bad project. But if we kind of extract, if we kind of take the macro view, right? 90% of projects were shit, or have been shit, right? So even those that, because lots of people have done crypto interviews on these projects, and they've also turned to shit, right? Not just Sparkster, but lots of projects. But I definitely do give Sparkster had a larger consensus of being shit.
That's true. So what about resistance in that instance? Now that you have a better tech team to analyze these things, and also given that they basically ousted you, what's your position on their tech?
I mean, their tech is decent, but with the tech team we have now, they definitely would not approve of resistance, right? That's something.
That's really bold of you to say, because My own personal deductions were something that I would never touch. I would not invest in that, and I have been very clear about it. So are you saying that the tech team that you have now, because you have invested in a really high quality one, you're saying that they wouldn't touch it?
Yeah. I mean, and this is disclosure. I'm still an investor in the project.
But that
I
really
still have.
shows your honesty about this. If you're investing in it and you're still telling us that your team wouldn't, that's a really respectful thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Genuinely.
just the person I've been, right? I
Mm.
can't really hold back, right?
Yeah,
Something
but
is
I
too
mean,
cool.
it's respectful in the sense that you're acknowledging some of the concerns you have,
Yeah,
even of your own
but
investment.
yeah, but that's the issue I've kind of had being so public, right? So, for example, with resistance, right? I'm an investor in it. I was an advisor in it, but I've not gotten paid as an advisor, right? For any work, right?
Hmm.
Working with the project for 7 months, flying all over the world, right? The CEO basically just fired all the advisors who would tell him not to turn this into a pump and dump, basically, and to actually execute. So, and me, Bank and Denzi, all those guys have been fired,
Hmm.
right? Evan on Tech has left the project. I don't even know if they have any advisors left, right?
Okay,
Especially
so Ivan's left,
planning.
but he was an advisor that had received payment. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
I mean, I don't know how much if he got paid. I mean, I'm pretty but if I had to speculate, I'm pretty sure he's the only advisor who got paid
Mm-hmm.
for any work or any
But you
service.
didn't.
No, I mean, well, not the full payment we're supposed to get,
I see.
right?
Because they fired you.
Yeah. So disclosure, I think it was only like 10 grand out
Mm.
of the. We're supposed to get like 1% of tokens, something like
Yes,
that.
I have to admit, when I read through your portfolio, I instantly, your statement of the compensation you received, I was shocked it was so low, and I presumed it was because they pushed you out before they paid the full amount.
Well, I mean, so here's what really happened. Okay, since we're being
Let's
so
go
candid.
there.
So we told the CEO, we had a call with him and said, you told us this was going to launch in 1 to 2 months, right? We're 7 months in, we'll still have no exchange. You've been telling us you're talking to Hubi for 2 or 3 months, telling all the investors in our network, right, who are primarily investing because of us, that you're talking to Hubi, Binance, whatever. We met the Hubi listing manager, Hubi Prime listing manager in Paris. Talked to him face to face. Hey, so we hear you talking to Resistance. It's like, who's Resistance? I said, okay. Then
Okay.
we go back with Anthony, talk to him about it. He's like, oh, I'm going through Hubi Mena or some other low level guy. Give him some time. Then we call Hubi because now one of the things of being an advisor who travels the world, I have
Mm.
contacts to all these exchanges. Right.
Right.
So when he tells me it's one thing, I go and double check directly with the company. And the company tells me, no, this is not what's happening. So then you add on how it's been 7 months, no mainnet launch, no IEO. You had a call and said, okay, you know what? What's going on? Like,
Yep. Which is a
we,
fair thing to do. I mean, you had insights that others don't necessarily
yeah,
have, so you were calling them
yeah,
on it.
yeah. So we called and basically had like a intervention, basically, right? We had an
Hmm.
intervention and said, we've been working 7 months for free, basically.
Yep.
Our entire team has been working diligently 7 months for free, right? But I mean, you have to launch, right?
Yep.
Because the way it was going, most exchanges didn't want to IO a competing exchange, right? So actually, it was my idea that they should launch the IEO on their own platform. I've
Hmm.
been telling him this for months, and he never did it. Now in July, they announced they're going to be doing it after they fired me, right? But prior to that, I was telling him for months, and I said, okay, you know what? Because he their initial hard cap was 25 million. I convinced him to bring it down to 18, then even lower to like 6.8 million.
Hmm.
But getting him to decrease that took months because he was stubborn, right?
Hmm.
And as that was happening, the market got worse and worse and worse. So nobody wanted to invest in it,
Right.
right? This was December to January, March, whatever.
Hmm.
So then it comes to a point, he says, okay, you know what? This is what's happening, right? He wants to cut our pay because he's decreased the hard cap,
Yep.
right? And we said, okay, I mean, that's fine. But if we're going to sign any updated contract, we need you to put in all a milestone and roadmap of all the things you expect to do and make that part of the contract.
So that they're
Because
accountable to their plan.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
so that they're accountable to the plan. This
Mm-hmm.
whole thing of raising funds indefinitely, right, is making the project look like a money grab.
It's also really devaluing the whole ecosystem as a whole, because how can you
Yeah.
trust something that's not proving itself, just like a Series A to B to C round in the IPO model? Because you come from that world, you understand that. They have to have proof of development. So going back to your story, clearly something happened where they just weren't willing to.
Yeah, so that's basically it, right. He was not willing to put their roadmap on in the brand new contract,
Mhm.
right? So a week later, he fired us, right? And that was fine to me, because if he didn't do that, we were gonna quit as well, right? So we were actually gonna tell the community we were quitting the project.
Got it. So
But
Ian, what are your thoughts on the Dutch auction process? I want to be really open about this. I was
it's
not.
money grab.
Well,
It's
I was
money
not a
grab.
big fan of some of the other projects that we've seen list with the Dutch auction, because it affords for a high entry point, but it gradually just diminishes over time. So are you concerned this is, a questionable approach, or this is a concerning approach?
Well, I mean, I have to be pretty consistent, right?
Mm,
I've never been a fan of well, not money grabs, but Dutch auctions.
mm.
My community knows this, right? The only Dutch auction I've done that did pretty well was Raid and Network, which was over 2 years ago.
And it had a lot of hype then as well, though.
Yeah, but my community knows I'm not a big fan of Dutch networks. I mean, Dutch auctions.
Mm.
So I can't, even if I'm an investor to this project and was advising them, say all of a sudden this is amazing, right? But the issue I do have publicly is, because lots of people got into this project because of me,
Mm.
they still have their investment in the project. So they don't want to hear me say anything bad about
Yes,
this. They still want
yes.
their money. But then
Mm.
you have other investors who want me to be public and transparent and say everything I think about the project, even if it means it could hurt.
You're in what we call a rock in a hard place, really. It's a double-edged sword for you. Now, Ian, I'm not sure how much you can disclose about some of the groups you've been involved with, where you've really tried to educate, as you said, in certain groups where people have come in and listened to you, in essentially Telegram groups, for example. How much you're willing to tell us about that world?
In terms of the private groups, or
Yeah, so we can understand your position, what you do in those groups, and how does it help people?
yeah, so I have lots of groups I'm part of, right? The main ones, we have a private syndicate, or well, not really a syndicate, because we don't really pool anymore, right?
Is it like a discussion group?
Yeah, so like a private discussion group, right? People
Mm-hmm.
know this CMT crypto money team.
Yeah.
This is about 200 people privately, right? People who are doing big things in the crypto space, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had some big names be part of this in the past, right? And
So
that's
big
really,
players that all work together to just discuss their interests.
yeah. So that's one thing. Then I have my own kind of private mastermind groups I had, right? I used to have my Patreon. This is
Mm-hmm.
kind of a continuation of that, right? Where other people who, because the first group is only people I know and I'm friends with, or are friends of friends.
Right.
Right. This other one is more like a paid private mastermind, where we have biweekly calls, just kind of discussing projects, sharing deal flow.
Mm-hmm.
Just have traders come in and now do technical analysis. We do
Mm-hmm.
project reviews. We provide reports, analysis. Definitely not investment advice, right? Because
No, but the thing I would want to ask you is that we see this trend where there's a paid subscription model for services rendered, whether that be through your paid mastermind, because you also have a free service as well called Free Mastermind, as I've noticed.
yeah, yeah.
But the thing I wanted to really ask you was, do you think that this is the right approach for yourselves and even entities like I was talking to you about with Crypto Briefing recently released Symmetry, a paid service for information, education, and I guess additional information that's privileged because of who they are. And many of the entities, the Block do a similar model. It's a way of getting revenue. They have to survive, I suppose. But is this the right strategy? Because how does this reinforce open access for everybody if it's a pay-to-play model? And often it's expensive for people, and thus precludes the uni student, the blue-collar worker.
Yeah, good question. I mean, but I think it's something that's justified. It's where the market is going. I mean, even me myself, I'm kind of pivoting to this model with token metrics, right? this is me taking my spreadsheet, which was free and sometimes paid, to being now a dynamic web application.
Mm-hmm.
So think kind of like Morningstar for crypto, or kind of like a Bloomberg terminal, but for crypto, but via a web dashboard. I'm basically investing my own money now and building a company, hiring all these all-star people from Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, these big names to come build this product with me. And I'm not really investing in them. I'm doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've kind of learned in the 3 years what people need. The last 3 years has been really the best customer research process for me.
Right. So if
I
I
feel
was
like
going to purchase the mastermind, Ian, what would I get, from the service if I was going to give you money, and how much would it cost me?
Well, I mean, the private mastermind, I'm not really pitching that or selling that anymore, right? Because right
Oh.
now, everything is now going towards tokenmetrics. I mean, in the past, so when I launched it initially with the Patreon, it spanned all the way from $10 a month private alerts all the way to one-on-ones, which people were paying $2,500 a month for 2 calls with me.
Right.
But now this year I do have it, but it's not really a priority. Right now we only have the group calls, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
basically I think like about 1,500 a month, something like that. But
Okay.
now everything I'm shifting towards tokenmetrics because I believe I can serve more people globally at different price points.
So when will that be out, Ian? And will it be a subscription model that'll all be transparent?
Yes. Yeah. So subscription model, everything's going to be fully transparent. We
Mm-hmm.
definitely have things we're working on. We can't really mention publicly yet until they've kind of been approved and we can mention them. But
Sure.
the idea is to really take everything we've been doing to the next level. And I'm definitely I've been working a lot, especially with my legal counsel, to make this the most transparent platform out there. Right. I mean, I'm
Okay.
basically trying to unshill myself. People know me for being a shill, and I've been working with legal teams trying to unshill myself and everything we're doing to make this as fully transparent and objective without having any conflicts of interest.
Do you think
Right?
it's also hard to wipe the mud off, to use the analogy, since you're saying unchill, because mud sticks and you've had mud thrown at you, you possibly put some mud on yourself, through the process. Now you're trying to clean up your act. Is it a tough gig to do when crypto is relatively small as a community, even globally? Everyone knows you, everyone knows your name. Is it tough to reframe what Ian Balina stands for?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely tough, but I don't think it's impossible,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I know most of the things that have been used to reframe who I am as a person have been FUD or fake news, right? So I know they'll be easy to dispel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because lots of people haven't really done the in-depth research, right? Because people talk about me being a shill or whatever, but they don't know how fully transparent I am.
Mm.
Because other people don't look like shills, but they're the biggest shills because if they're getting paid and not disclosing it, but I'm disclosing it, then I mean, that's a bigger conflict of interest.
Yeah, it's the pot calling the kettle black in that instance. It's the greatest act of hypocrisy there is. Now, there's a tough topic at the moment I want to talk to you about, and that's Tron. And that's because right now we've seen him postpone his all-important, lunch with Warren Buffett. He was ill, allegedly. Well, no, he was, let's be honest. But there was also an event recently where influencers attended. Some went on their own dime. Some were paid to go for flights, accommodation, and I'm not sure what else. But I wanted to more talk about the hype factor. And Tron is a really good example of this because masters of hype. Is this an exemplar of the very core problem that we see? And that is how things can be thwarted from the bottom up to really utilize all of their connections, their network to showcase something that may not yet be even built properly or may not have the proper adoption factor that's the right dev community to really be matching the kind of hype that it has.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did see that on actually I saw that on Ivan's Instagram, on his Instagram story. All the other influencers there. I mean, I think there's definitely a big conflict of interest doing something like that. I mean, I have done that once, right? Where a project in that hash flew me to Poland for like a press tour or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But when that project failed and did horrible, I think it's now illiquid, down over 95%. I
Yes.
hope never to do anything like that ever again, right? Because
Okay.
just the fact of even doing that is kind of like you're putting your name or brand behind it. You're kind of basically endorsing it. Even if you may think you're not doing it, even though you think, hey, I'm getting this nice trip, let me bring my friends or my spouse or whatever, right? People will always view things you do as an influencer as endorsements, even when you don't think they're endorsements. Right? Even when you give disclaimers. I mean, I've told people straight up, hey, this is not an endorsement. I'm just doing this for educational purposes, whatever. Just all the disclaimers in the world. But when something bad goes wrong, they'll still blame you for it.
Well, Ian, I wanted to ask you this because some of the influencers that went to that event I know personally, and I've chatted with them since that event, and the feedback has been very strong from some of them saying, look, you know, I did the best I could. I was objective. I was a journalist, and that I can understand, you know, because obviously some of the feedback even I've watched online, the way in which they've made it clear that they don't necessarily support certain things that Tron are doing, they're saying yet they were potentially paid through hotels and flights to get there. So, you know, full respect to those who aren't just simply doing that overt shill. But even in that context, do you see any problems with someone being paid to attend an event and, you know, essentially showcase that on their channel?
Yeah, I mean, I think the proper way of doing it, that actually are protocols of doing this, right? If you look to other industries, which is something I've been doing as we're kind of getting ready for tokenomics, right? For example, if you're an investment advisor, I believe you can't accept gifts worth over $100, right? So, in terms of, I mean, if you're trying to really be objective, I don't think you can get paid by something, right? So the way typical journalism works is they go there on their own dime, on their own money to cover the project, right? The fact that they're paying for their hotel room, for their travel, or they're actually getting paid Bitcoin or dollars or tokens, that's the conflict of interest.
And that's really interesting because you've been there, you know, you've been there and done that. What about if they invest? Can they invest and attend? If they're a journalist and they disclose their investors?
I mean, that's tough, right? But the way I view it, right, this is why I even told people I was thinking about becoming a Bitcoin maximalist, right? But
I want to talk about that too.
The big media kind of construed that and took like a 10-second clip and ignored the 10-minute interview and didn't even see the stuff behind the interview and just kind of made that the headline. But the reason why I was saying it is because I've been speaking with my legal team and we're trying to figure out the best way to really be transparent and objective in terms of reviewing projects. And we've even thought about not investing in projects at all so that I can be fully transparent and objective when it comes to actually.
Yes, I do understand that. I mean, at the end of the end, though, you don't get a chance to participate, you know, as someone who wants to be, you know, engaged at the financial level as well and play in that arena. But I do understand what you're saying. But then there's the maximalist camp itself. You know some of those prominent maximalists. We're talking about Jimmy Song. We know Tone Vays. There's a whole, you know, the whole list of people. But what is your position on maximalism itself? I was speaking with Peter McCormick today, actually, and I asked him, because obviously he's friends with Pompliano, and I said, you know, are there any legit coins out there beyond the narrative of BTC? And his response was, no, they're all shit. So what do you feel about that, given that clearly you're a proponent of blockchain technology? Yeah. Obviously you support BTC, but is there any space for legitimacy? Is there any space for legit coins?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think there are legit coins or tokens out there besides Bitcoin, right? So in that regards, I'm not fully a Bitcoin maximalist, but I would say I'm more bearish on altcoins than I was before, right? So now, especially now that we have a better team around us, right? Actually have them go through projects. I would say 95% are shitcoins.
I would say you're very, you know, you're very polite in that sense. I would push that percentage much higher, honestly, because majority of them are shitcoins. But this is the thing, Ian. You know, are we missing the mark by simply polarizing everything from Bitcoin to shitcoin? Because I think a lot of people conflate altcoin with shitcoin. So what's your position on that? Can you give us some examples, perhaps, you know, from your team where you're looking at certain projects that aren't shit?
Yeah, I mean, so we've had them look at a few projects. The ones they did like, the one that they like the most right now is Blockstack,
Hmm.
right? That one our developers love. I mean, that for us personally is scoring very well. It's scoring off the charts.
Hmm.
We're still looking at Facebook Libra, right? We still have our developer going through the code of Facebook Libra,
Hmm.
but initially things are positive,
Well, that's
right?
really interesting because you're going for a controversial coin. The most controversial with Libra, which was another time for another discussion you and I should have. But then you're also talking about Blockstack. Now, that one's interesting because of Reg A, approvals for a utility token model all the way through to the SEC. You don't see that every day. They spend a lot of money to get that approval, and they took a lot of time. Do you think that this is going to be a common trend in the future? Are we going to see beyond
I think so.
securitization?
Yeah, because we have Blockstack, we have props, right? I'm actually talking with the props team trying to on Monday for an update on how their Reg A Plus went, right?
Hmm.
But I think, especially projects from the US, this is the future. This is the only way there,
I think so
right?
too.
This,
Mm.
so I think this is going to become a trend. Probably by 2 years' time, we'll have more projects that are doing this,
Right.
right? The main thing missing right now is the exchanges for trading security tokens.
Mm. And we know that's
Because
coming. I mean, as you'd be aware, some of them are now designing these
yeah,
token. There's even stock exchanges being built, and there's support for security STOs even potentially in the future. We're not
yeah,
sure how that'll play out.
yeah.
But with regard to the US, what's the one thing that does concern you? Because you have to be compliant there if you're going to operate with your own entity compared to the rest of the world. Because many crypto entities are leaving the US.
Yeah, I mean, the US, in my view, in the last few years has been behind in innovation. I mean, not really in terms of the tech per se, but in terms of regulation, adoption, right? And that's really because the technologies being invented here have had to leave and go elsewhere,
Hmm.
right, to really thrive globally. But I think now with the SEC kind of starting to approve things, I think the market is going to grow because I believe at the end of the day, the US is a market that cannot be ignored, right? That's why, because there are great products coming from here,
Mm.
right? So I think this is something that has to be part of the future of cryptocurrency and blockchain. It has to involve some kind of involvement
Mm.
by the
It's a
US
really
market.
interesting point you make as well. And let's discuss that sort of trade war we're seeing go on, if it does exist, between China and the US. It does seem to. Now, that potentially is permeating all the way through to crypto right now. And we can hark back to allusions to that with Tron. And the reason I say that is because a source from, as one of the influencers I heard today, listening to some of the content, was that when they'd asked Cliff, one of the core members of the Tron team, about whether or not there was more reasons why Justin had not attended beyond his illness, and they alluded to that there was more, and there was potentially something going on with concerns that
Oh,
the
wow.
Tron team had with
Trade wars?
China. Well, with China more so with regard to some of the pressure. So, do you think that's going to is a part of crypto? Is we're seeing the strong presence of Chinese presence in the world of crypto. We're now seeing the pressure or the push for regulation in the US. So, do you see any of that play out in crypto more generally?
I mean, it's tough to say, but I mean, I think with the market being global and also things getting political, there
Mm.
definitely are some issues that do arise, right? I mean,
Mm.
I met Justin in Hong Kong. I mean, he gets lots of flack online, but he's one of the smartest guys I've met. I mean, as a marketer, he's a genius,
Yeah,
right?
well, I mean, does that make you though one of the smartest though? Or does that make you one of the smartest because you're a marketing genius?
I mean, it depends, right? How do you define smart, right? Smart is not
Mm.
just being a physicist or a matheless,
Hmm.
right? An artist can be smart, right? There are lots of different. Somebody can have a high IQ and be a marketer, right? But in terms of the things he's doing now, I'm not here to analyze the tech, right? I
Mm.
mean, actually, because actually, to be honest, Justin's son in a way kind of has inspired me, and
Okay.
the way he
So
inspired.
he's a marketing expert. His entrepreneurial savvy is really second to none based on evidence of what he's achieved through his model.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but the way I view it is like this. He took Tron is basically, I believe, a fork of Ethereum, right? He took
Hmm.
a Chinese fork of Ethereum, added some biz dev, and some marketing. And now this guy is meeting with Warren Buffett. He paid $4.5 million to meet with Warren Buffett.
You did.
And I was thinking to myself, I mean, I respect Justin as a marketer, so I'm not trying to like trash him or anything like that. I'm just kind of doing this from my perspective as an entrepreneur. And I said, if he can do this from just a fork, I mean, what excuse do any projects have from actually building something good and getting awareness?
I think you raised the point, though, the important point of good, because looking at it from a tech standpoint and FA standpoint is that most importantly there has to be that proper standard development. You know, in terms of technological standards for that ecosystem, for that blockchain, there has to be clear on-roads and on-ramps for development, so it's nice and easy. That is not happening yet with Tron. There's so many things they have to build technologically to match what you're saying. So that they are more my concerns, Ian, that this narrative of hype has to match the quality and integrity of the technology to be adopted. Because if the things aren't adopted in the end, again, as an Aussie phrase, what the bloody hell are we doing? These things need to be used. So are you bullish on Tron to, eventually get it right and become...
Me personally, no, right? I've not invested in Tron at all. Don't plan to.
Okay. Okay, well, that was pretty direct. Now, now, what about KuCoin? This is a tough topic too, because they dumped you. They got rid of you after the world tour.
So that's the part I have to fix as well.
Oh, I'll fix it.
So they did not dump me per se. Right?
Okay.
So,
well, my apologies. I should retract that. So they didn't dump you, but what happened?
Yeah, so that's where when somebody posts something online and the media takes it out of context, that's why I don't really trust crypto media anymore. Okay. So I was an ambassador. Well, really, I wasn't really an ambassador. KuCoin had a sponsorship deal with me. Right? They came to me, and I was talking to several exchanges, and I was talking to Binance, to OKX, CoinSuper, a bunch of exchanges, and they chose to sign me and be my sponsor, basically, right? Make KuCoin the official exchange for me and whatever, to sponsor my content, the crypto world tour, the travel, all that. And the contract basically expired, right? It was basically expired.
So you'd done the world tour, they paid for all of that, you promoted them, traveled around the world on their dime, and then it expired.
Yeah, and it basically expired. And then KuCoin, KuCoin had an option to continue the contract, right? And they elected to not continue.
Did they say why? Did they mention what were the reasons?
I mean, they basically just mentioned that, hey, it's just a bear market, right? Every exchanges at that time were firing people, having layoffs, right? And the marketing budget was basically constrained.
So they just couldn't afford to continue to,
So they gave me the option to still possibly work with them, right? But for me, it didn't make sense to continue working with them if the budget or the price had changed.
Right. Okay. So you just elected to, acquiesce, move away, and do your own thing. So thanks for clearing that up. I really appreciate that. Now, with regard to other exchanges, I wanted to find out more, because you mentioned before that you're connected to many exchanges. You mentioned a few of them already, such as Huobi, Binance. I wanted to go a bit further because you recently interviewed IDEX, and I thought that was interesting. Coinbase, OKX, BitMax, list goes on and on and on. So I wanted to find out more about your relationship with exchanges and how important it's been for you to essentially support some of these projects that you work with.
I mean, liquidity is something all investors need, and also projects need, right? Because that can kill a project. So for us, during our world travels, we've always made we've taken time to really meet as many exchanges as we can, right? Whether the top ones or those we think are promising, right? And really meeting them in person helps establish a nice business relationship that really benefits both sides long term, right? Because we help them find up and coming good projects for their platforms, and we can help projects find the top exchanges to work with and list on, right? So it's something that's been very, very crucial and vital to us, right? I think it's something for any investor who wants to get, I guess, priority in terms of investing and allocations, if you can, because all the projects ask you, what can you do for us?
Mm-hmm.
Right? If one of the things in your toolkit is, hey, I can get you meetings with whatever exchanges you like, or whatever other projects you want to partner with for biz
That's a
dev,
big deal.
right? It's a big deal, right? So
Mm.
that's why for us, we take it seriously.
Especially if now you've cleaned up your act and you're not talking to shit coins but good projects, then that should be good theoretically for the space if we do see an emergence of proof of utility. I really mean that because, as you know, I love research, so my focus is very much aligned with that.
Well, I mean, I will contest you on the last statement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because yes, we do have some shit coins here and there, but for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, our record was still pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the first two IDOs on Binance were projects we had discovered 6 months before then, right? We discovered Matic Network in Hyderabad, India, in August 2018.
I remember because I was talking to them the
Right?
same time. Your name came up.
And then basically they kind of became popular or whatever, but we traveled to India to meet them.
I
And
remember
then
actually
Harmony,
talking to them that day that you were in India.
yeah. And then Harmony, I've been to their garage. I mean, to their house in San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
way before they were on Binance. KuCoin, because I was working with them, right?
Mm.
Cody, Chromia.
But the thing I wanted to
So
ask you though, Ian, I wanted to ask you, because you do know those exchanges and you would know that I know some of them as well, is that at what point does it become scenarios of collusion? Now, I'm not suggesting that with Harmony and Matic because I do believe that there is some real core value in those projects, and I will be clear on that. But as you can appreciate, sometimes if you have the privilege of this access, no doubt sometimes it can be in reverse, where there could be some sort of knowledge or insider understanding of what agendas are playing in the back end. So, for example, if you're aware of exchanges that have decided to support a company, or more likely VCs that have all aligned in endorsing a project, essentially what can happen is, a more collaborative approach, a more aligned approach to really proper project up can happen. So do you ever find that as well in your experience that that's happened, where not everything's come from due diligence and good research, but more from the network?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think exchanges have been getting way too much power, especially the top ones,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the Binances basically, where they can really do anything to a project, right? Like I even know some projects where they basically can't talk or mention anything publicly until Binance announces the IEO, and even and between that IEO and the next IEO, they can't really say anything that's not approved by the PR of Binance,
Right.
or let's say any other exchange. So the exchange is basically controlling the external communications prior to the IEO and after the IEO for like 30 days.
Okay, so in that instance, obviously they're trying to, affect media outcomes as well.
Yeah.
And as you've said before, is that sometimes there's efforts from certain parties to try and thwart outcomes for the financial success of a listing, especially in the IEO context. So there's a lot of things going on. So that would also explain why you're so averse to the IEO. But in terms just of you having access to a lot of information, it's very powerful. I mean, do you realize the power that you actually have in the beginning?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something lots of people who are working with exchanges and projects have experienced, right? That's why I think having more transparency,
Mm-hmm.
right, is something that definitely helps,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I've definitely tried to be as transparent as possible, right? But it's also why, I mean, it probably makes sense, especially to somebody who's so public, not to be partaking in things like that.
Yep, that makes sense. Now, Ian, give us some tips from your tech team. What's something that you find interesting coming up? And I'll give you one if you do as well. What's a project that's at the forefront of your mind for prospective investment?
I mean, I mentioned Blockstack, right?
Yeah, but we know about Blockstack. I mean, the ones that you're currently looking at that maybe we don't know.
I mean, that's really it. Because we haven't really been investing much, right? I kind of told my community this recently
Mhm.
because right now I'm all in on tokenomics, right?
Okay, well, I've got one for you that I'll let you know of. Two I'm researching right now. One is Ultra. I'm absolutely fascinated by that gaming ecosystem. It's, in my opinion, very, very developed. So that's one. Already listed, so even better to list, let you know. I don't have any investment in that at all. I have no token deals, all that crap. I just think that that's technologically interesting. Another one that I recently spoke to was called Band Protocol. And that one is Oracle based. So if people are interested in Chainlink, they perhaps want to go and read into that one. So there's just two
Okay.
that I wanted to let you know about that I'm looking at. Now, I wanted to sort of wrap up this
Actually,
interview.
hold on. So I do
Yeah.
have one project actually.
Okay.
So last month we made our first equity investment in a company from Techstars Alchemist, their incubator. So it's called Alchemy. It's a decentralized liquidity protocol.
Hmm.
So think basically decentralized market making.
Okay. Interesting.
So that's, yeah, that's one we like. Now this wasn't fully reviewed by our tech team.
Hmm.
That our tech team has kind of been growing. All right. So, but this was one we got in a month
Hmm.
ago, but we think it's pretty good.
Well, at least you're letting us know, so I appreciate that. And what are your thoughts on wash trading itself? On all of the bullshit volume, the fake volume that's absolutely rife right through the space. Does it ever worry you that once regulation sweeps in properly globally, that it's really going to showcase a lot of the BS and what really does exist as true volume and what isn't?
I mean, I think it sucks. I think watch trading is the worst, right?
Hmm.
Because as an investor, you're trying to calculate when you're gonna go in and out of a trade or investment based on the volume, right? Especially as a large investor.
Mm.
Now, if you end up miscalculating that based on fake volume, right, that costs you money, right? And then even the projects, right, because the exchanges charge a high listing fee based on fake volume. So I think
Exactly.
this definitely has to be cleaned up, right? I mean, so I'm glad when regulation comes in and puts an end to this. That even me myself in the platform we're building, we won't tolerate any fake volume, right? So any
Okay.
project, any changes with fake volume won't even be in our platform.
So who are your top exchanges, Ian, if you have that criteria in mind? Who would you regard as a top exchange?
I mean, I think the best is the Bitwise report that came out, right, where
Hmm.
they ranked exchanges. I mean, in terms of liquidity, I mean, in terms of, I would say that the cleanest exchange, I would say really the US exchanges, Coinbase, Gemini, uh, Kraken, right?
Hmm.
Those are pretty clean above board.
Right.
Uh,
And because you mentioned it, I will try and find that article. I'll try and find that report because it is something that a lot of YouTubers do talk about. A lot of, crypto researchers certainly utilize to assess what constitutes really genuine and authentic volume. So I think it's really important that you did raise that. Clearly regulations coming as well. I wanted to also have a quick chat with you about, because you did a video on this actually, on this very topic of the bull market, your predictions for the future. You even talked about fake pumps. You had people at Crypto, Ivan on Tech, Da Vinci on with you. Um, what are your thoughts now with regard to current state of the market? We're in a very questionable period of time. Are we in the emergence of a bull, or are we sort of going to see a trajectory that's very different from what we know?
Well, one of the good things now of having a team of people who are smart in different domains, right, is we now have a professional quant trader. So I would rather just kind of recite his opinion on this because
Mm-hmm.
this is his specialty, right? So short term, it's bearish, right? Because Bitcoin has been going down from 13,000 to like 10,000, 9,000.
Mm-hmm.
But we think medium and long term we're bullish, right?
Okay.
Now the short term, this is coming more as a day trader, right? So, but in terms of medium, well, let's say a month and out, right? We're bullish.
Got it. Okay. Now, what
But this
about
is
you?
our opinions.
Sure. No, I appreciate that, because you can't really give a financial advice. But I wanted to ask you as well, do you think we're going to see more of a separation of the BTC stronghold and, the emergence of blockchain business? And because of your time in this space, what that actually means, the uptake of business to really start to use coins. Do you think that's going to really start to change the game in which we can play, because we can start to literally support actionable and proven utilities that grow in volume because the company grows.
Oh, wow. I mean, the way I view it is, I mean, I think Bitcoin is still going to have a use case, right? It's not going anywhere. Bitcoin is still going to be king for the most part. But
king as currency, do you mean? Or king as SOV?
As in market dominance. And
okay.
But I think what people are really underestimating Facebook Libra, right? I mean, I think once they get past the whole regulation snafu they have in DC with the meetings they're having, once they launch, I mean, I think it's going to be Armageddon for most of these shitcoins. Right? And that's really why me myself, I'm getting out of most altcoins or shitcoins, because what are they doing that cannot be done with Facebook Libra? Like,
well,
not
this is the interesting
currency, but the actual they built their own smart contract blockchain, and we're having developers look at the code and they're just drooling all over it.
Well, it's interesting because, and I'd love to talk to developers at some point, because if we talk about the narrative of currency, for example, and the use case of currency, that's a very different thing to utility, as you know. So Libra, designed as a currency, centralized, by business precepts, but technologically decentralized mechanisms. So interesting combination. We also see now, Ian, that there are things like Terra Money from Korea, where they've had a similar basket of currency backing pegged by multiple currencies, but they interestingly have their mainnet out as opposed to Libra in their theoretical period now. So I'm not suggesting at all, I'm not contesting your thoughts on Libra, but the interesting point is that the reactions already of Libra have been global, and yet we see things like Terra Money that also have seigniorage as well as another key asset already flourishing in e-commerce in Asia, and they literally are a flourishing digital currency. So the question is, are you bullish on currency? Clearly with Libra you are, but are you also bullish on utility, whereby we might...
I mean, depends. Utility tokens, not really, to be honest. I mean, nothing at the moment. I mean, besides, I would say a handful of products actually worth their weight in gold. Right? I mean,
no pun intended with crypto gold.
So I mean, like as mentioned before, Blockstack is one we really, really like, right? So we think that has actual chance of actually doing something.
Got it.
Right? But everything else is pretty much, I mean, pretty much just scams, as some people say.
Yeah, well, there certainly are scams out there. Well, Ian Balina, it's been a very long conversation. I was nervous at first because we have a history. We've had words before, but one thing I can say is that I have always thought of you as a crypto colleague in this space, regardless of your agenda. I have a lot of respect for you coming on and speaking with me today. It's been very, very transparent, and hopefully, Ian, we can catch up again and speak in this same fashion, continue to really open up the dialogue, really allow people insight into our experience, our knowledge, and just continue to change the game, allow for this technology to emerge as it should, and that is to enable more people with more access to new economies.
Well, I mean, thank you so much. It was a pleasure, right? I mean, yeah, we definitely had our differences, but we've put those aside, right? Because at the end of the day, right, I feel like me and you are alike, right, in many facets. And it was a pleasure, right? I mean, you've been very transparent, very objective, very direct, right? And as you know me, I'm always transparent and direct, and I have no issues telling all.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, that was clear today, and you've said more than I think any interview I've actually had, Ian. So thank you again for just putting more truth, transparency, and trust back into the blockchain. Thank you also for cleaning up your own act and acknowledging that. I think that we need to see more of that from other parties. You are leading the way in there. And certainly it's also inspiring me to make sure that I'm accountable as much as possible and really acknowledge the all imperative, and that is the tech must align with everything else that we do. So thanks again, mate, for your time. I wish you all the very best in the things that you pursue in the future. And hopefully we can catch up again, Ian, to talk more. But for now, it's Brad Laurie signing off for BlockVera, and thank you very much again for your time.
All right, thanks. Take care.
See you, mate.